So real quick before we start this video, we wanted to point out that I'm not going to make a lot of small clips on this channel, so anything that I don't deem this channel worthy is going to be on my Instagram and my Twitter feed, so just give that a look over there. That'll be down in the description. Alright. So I guess we can probably all agree that 2020 has been an absolutely crazy year. So, honestly, I think the problems all started back in November. Not for the obvious reasons, but just for my own personal experience. The company that I was working for, the business wasn't going great, and they really didn't, they had work, but everything was spread so thin, it was awful. So my supervisor was like, hey, you're good at pretty much everything we have. Can you go ahead and get trained on home security? And I was a little iffy at first, but he's like, yeah, we just need somebody for this general area. That way we don't have to have our Baltimore guys drive all the way out here, which is about an hour and a half, 2 hours away from Baltimore sometimes, depending on the traffic. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. As long as it's that, I'm all for it. And at this point, we were also doing a bunch of weird Amazon and Best Buy gigs. Essentially, my company did a lot of stuff with contracting. So sometimes when you called up Best Buy or Amazon to get your TV up on the wall, it was us that actually came out. So all well and good. So November, the end of November, I started doing home security training, which it's basically just installing equipment. They're like a lot of the work that we'd be doing would be installing batteries, quick in and out stuff. So I was told. So, yeah. Let's see what we have here. Yeah, December, we started hearing more and more stuff about COVID. And strangely enough, around the end of December, beginning or end, I can't remember, me and my younger brother both got the flu, the regular flu, and it was really obnoxious. And it's one of those things where you're working in people's houses that you don't really think about it until you're there for a while, where you're working all over somebody's house, and then they happen to mention to you, oh, sorry about the mess, our kids are sick. I understand your TV's broken, but don't have me come into your house when everything's a virus nightmare. And we didn't even get to the point yet where everybody was worried about COVID. It was so obnoxious. Mid-December, I had to go in for locksmith training for the home security because it was required in some states that I was working in. And that was also a nightmare because it was on the other side of DC. And the traffic was atrocious. It was 5 hours of driving a day. Wasn't getting paid anything for driving. So at the end of the training for that, I went ahead and decided I'm not going to pay to take my van home every night. Because I'm not paying, it's the company van. They were charging $40 a week just to have it within 10 miles of the office from my house. So I'm like, okay, I'll just take my car to the office. It's going to take a little bit more time every day, but they're not going to charge me $40 a week for this, because at this point I'm getting paid peanuts anyway. So January came, and they started giving me jobs for security. They only gave me 1 week out with somebody that's been doing it, and 1 week is definitely not enough. I mean, I know all the mental stuff as far as how to hook up what, but like the tricks of how to get things to work properly, like they can only train you so much by the book, but when a system doesn't work the way it's supposed to, even a brand new system, that's where you actually need to learn some stuff up to date, essentially. So, and it was really obnoxious because they kept giving me jobs in Baltimore and DC and farther out than I was expecting. So, I just getting aggravated with that. February, bought a 70cc kit for my moped. Just figured I'd save a little bit on gas if I'm driving the moped to work every day instead of the car. So that was fine for a while. But unfortunately, in February as well, dealing with getting home late and just everything in general, my fridge died. Now, I thought I could fix it because 2 years ago the same exact problem happened. And I managed to fix it for maybe a day or two again, but it just died again. So we had to pay $1,500 for a new refrigerator. And that's one of the cheaper ones. Appliances are way too expensive, especially when you're not making any money. And February, I guess another thing I can say, I started working on peppers. COVID was still getting bad, but nobody was panicking over it yet. So, started planting peppers. I think I made a video on it. I can't even remember at this point. March is when they closed the schools down in Maryland. Absolutely nothing in the stores. And the worst part is when everything started closing down and then they started to do all these essential businesses deal. Once I started doing the essential businesses deal, it was hard to do anything. And my car just happened to break down again. It was the brake rotor. Like, I had to replace the rotor itself, and I also had to replace the wheel bearing. And that took a couple days, so I had to get my brother to drive me to my office. The days that the moped was way too cold to drive because, you know, March. You don't think of March as being cold, but it really is cold. It is funny. So, one of the things that they had mentioned on home security is, hey, we won't be as hard on you on all the sales stuff we started because Amazon, you can't sell anything on their appointments, and AT&T Home Security, which was what I was doing, we're not allowed to sell anything on appointments either. But guess what? Even though I was doing a lot of jobs that I wasn't eligible to sell anything on, they were still tracking it per job. So, or per day it was. So, you're telling me I have to sell a certain amount of things and then you're not giving me the opportunity to do it? What the hell? So they threatened to write me up because I wasn't selling enough stuff. Fun. April was great too because they're like, hey, with all this COVID stuff going on, you can use that as a selling point. So, like, the number one thing they tell you when you're training to do any sort of sales is don't use fear as a tactic. It's bad because, like, the ethics of it, don't use fear as a tactic, but all the places that I've ever tried to sell things, they'd be like, oh, yeah, tell them if you don't buy this, something bad's going to happen. How is that not using fear to sell stuff? It's like, what the heck is wrong with people? It literally said, hey, if you buy this from me, even though it's more expensive, that means you're not going to the store and potentially dying. I mean, I'm using less words than what they worded it, but that's exactly what they were pretty much telling me to tell people. April, my father got COVID. And my father did pretty good with it. His wife, not so much. She's fine now, obviously, but it was really bad there for a while. And their landlord was really, really picky. Like, in the middle of them being sick and everything, the landlord's like, hey, I'm running a daycare upstairs. You can't be sick down underneath my house here. So they were pretty much trying to kick them out. My father wanted to temporarily move in with us, but I'm like, yeah, you can't, because then I've got to take off work. My brother's going to take off work. It'll be just an absolute nightmare. So they ended up finding a hotel that they could rent, and the landlord paid for it. But it's like, who does this? Like, the fact that you have to run, people can still run a daycare when COVID was so big was just insane. Funny enough, in May, I went ahead and did the meme of just making a plague mask, and I'll show a picture there. Doesn't fit great, and I never had the confidence to really wear it anywhere. The only time I ever wore it was on Halloween at a gas station. That's the only place publicly I've worn it. But I have it if I need it for reasons. May, we were getting the garden ready, and the tiller that I had fixed from pulling out of a dumpster finally died on us. And I spent several weeks trying to fix that to no avail. But I managed to till enough that I could actually plant the peppers that I was trying to plant. But unfortunately for me, I wasn't thinking real straight, and we were still getting frosts in May, and it killed off a lot of each plant. I actually had several plants that died, and it was just an absolute disaster. On top of that, we were dealing with slugs. Gosh, if I had just waited a week or two and planted the peppers later, I would have had a lot more peppers this year than I did. Granted, we did get a lot of peppers, so it was decent. Also, with work, about that time, my company had me, again, working a lot of DC and Baltimore, and that was right about when all the protests were going on, and I just did not want to be there at all. You had to wear a mask at that point everywhere. And the worst part is when you're working hard and it's getting warmer out and you're sweating a lot and the masks you're wearing are getting filled with sweat, after a couple hours, if you don't have another mask to swap out, I mean, it smells like ammonia. Unfortunately, at this time period, I was gaining all the weight that I had lost during 2019. And just the depression in general was pretty bad. I was playing a lot of the game Destiny 2 with a couple of the guys that I was playing Rust with before. Spent a lot of my free time playing Destiny. Another thing I wanted to add real quick before I forget, about this time my hard drive on my computer died. And good grief, it was a lot harder to find a replacement than I was expecting. Also in June, like I was going through my Discord messages just trying to figure out everything that happened throughout the year. And it's funny, I messaged, this is just a quote from what I said to my brother. They're sending me to Baltimore for an emergency repair. Hopefully I will get home before tomorrow. It's pretty much how bad the time period, because it drove me crazy. There was nights that I was getting home at 9, 10, and then I have to wake up at 5 a.m., 6 a.m. to get off to work, to get to where I needed to go. They were complaining anytime that I got to a job after 8 a.m. It's like, what do you want me to do, people? You're driving me insane. I'm barely making any money on this job. You're basically paying me minimum wage to do a $30 an hour job. The systems with the home security were so bad. I cannot describe how bad these were. Like, if they had worked properly, it would have been a perfect job. But what was happening more often than not is you'd go in for something small, and you'd have to reinstall the entire system, set everything back up, reprogram each part of the alarm. There was a house that it was at that was so big, I'd get one end of the house perfect, and then the other end of the house said no signal, or poor signal. And it would only gauge the signal by 5 points. If the signal was 3, the points were too low. If it was 4, it was good. If it was 5, it was good. So I'd get some sections of the house that were pretty far away from the main alarm panel, up to 4 or 5 easily. And then it would switch. Like I would work on the other side, and then the other side would say poor signal. I would change frequencies, put boosters in, nothing worked. There was multiple times that I went to multiple customers, or the same customer multiple times, just because like something else would just stop working. Like I did everything that I was supposed to do, but the system would just blank out. I found out later, talking to one of my supervisors, that we weren't even supposed to be doing this system. It was supposed to be a temporary thing, and then they've been doing it for years, because I was told that it was a legacy system that's just out of date. Yeah. So June, the company tells me, hey, you're one of three technicians we have left for this area. So every day we're going to send you further and further out. So you're going to have to do these jobs. And about this time I was already ready to go back to my old job, because the only reason I left that job is because they had sales too. And once this job added sales, then it was kind of pointless. So they're like, hey, we need you to stick around at the very least for 2 weeks. That way we can get this other company to do Baltimore, so we won't have to do Baltimore anymore. I'm like, okay, I can be all right for 2 weeks. And they're like, okay, 2 weeks, 4 weeks at most. So, yeah. Not at all. So in July, they had me drive 215 miles for one customer. One customer. Each appointment made like $35. And they basically, because I wasn't technically getting paid hourly, the hourly would eat into my pay. So I could only make, I think it was $9 an hour, or it might have been lower than that because I never paid attention to it. $9 an hour unless I make more per job. So I drove all the way out there to help one person with one simple thing. And halfway there, I get a call from my brother's company that I put in an application for because I was just fed up with everything. And they're like, hey, you want to come in for an interview? I'm like, okay, when? They're like, can you come by tomorrow? I'm like, absolutely. So I called up my supervisor and I'm like, hey, I need tomorrow off. He's like, oh, what for? It's like, I got a job interview. He's like, oh, you're leaving? You've got a job interview? I'm like, yeah, I'm done. It's already been 4 weeks at this point. Unless you guys got the Baltimore company ready, then, I mean, you're kind of screwed because you were screwing me over all this time anyway. And, needless to say, I pretty much got hired on the spot. I'm pretty happy so far. It's been months. Just thinking back on everything I had to deal with this company that I was working with, like, there's no comparison. I'm making less money only because I'm working less hours. Think about that. I'm making more per hour technically. I'm working less hours. My mental state's finally going back up. So, yeah, it only took a couple days before I pretty much quit, left. I was going to give the 2 weeks notice in, but started working immediately. And they were down to one home security technician for like a 200-mile radius. Or no, would that be 400? I don't know. DC, Baltimore, Cumberland, everywhere. Everywhere in Maryland. And Virginia. and Pennsylvania. So pretty much they were screwed. But that's what happens to companies when they screw over their employees. So that didn't end my trouble with 2020 though. So 2 weeks after I got this job, my brake line broke on my car. So I was able to stop, figure out what was going on, and then make it home without having to do anything major, but that was insanely crazy. So for the next couple weeks, I was driving my moped to work until that broke too. So I'll put the picture there. The muffler just snapped. So I went ahead and just got some stuff at the store and kind of made a makeshift attachment there with the Mountain Dew can. And that lasted about 3/4 of the journey before I got home. And yeah, so I was able to weld that pretty quickly at home. And I had been working on my car for ages. I mean, it took hours and hours to get this car working, and just getting the right parts to fix a brake line, or at least very temporarily fix the brake line, fun time. So while I'm still working on fixing my car, and after I fixed the muffler, a couple weeks later, the flywheel breaks off inside the transmission of the moped. And so I'm like, okay, now I'm really screwed. So I had, luckily my schedule kind of lined up with my brother's a little bit, and I had him take me to work a couple of days. And yeah, I was able to put a new flywheel, or a replacement flywheel, on there from the other moped that I'm working on. I was able to get that home. And then I was able to finish up all the brake work that I needed to finish up on my car. Didn't quite get to patching up the holes, which you can see here. But that's still a work in progress. But if I still have the picture, I'll show it here of all the stuff that I ended up pulling out of the car. Because it wasn't just one brake line. It was actually 2 brake lines that went out. They just rusted to death. And then while working on that, the gas line popped in about the same spot. So I had to fix that too. It's all that salt they put on the roads. It just destroys that stuff underneath your car. And, I mean, the car is, 30 years old now. So I really can't complain too much. But yeah, that pretty much takes care of most of 2020 for me. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, man, my cat's still alive. I'm surprised. I mean, about 2 years ago, I thought he was going to die. And sometime in May, in between all this COVID stuff, his mouth swells up again. Apparently he had a tooth that I guess was impacted or something. And they ended up having to take that out. He's been on a very slow decline, but the more and more that he lives, and the older and older he gets, the messier and messier he becomes. And that's another thing. They don't tell you when you get a pet that they're going to take a lot of money. And it's not until you're in financial problems that you don't realize how expensive they are. I mean, I take care of my cat, and I pay for all my younger brother's expenses at the moment. And out of the two, my younger brother is cheaper. Cat litter is quite expensive for anything that actually works properly. Yeah, 2021, my cat will probably die. He's honestly not got much longer to live. As bad as it is to say, it's going to be an overall improvement for me when he does go, because He tracks literally everywhere. I've got to clean my bed sheets far too often. Two, the amount of food that he eats, or wants to eat at the very least, is quite substantial. Even with the cheapest wet food that I can get him, it's still costing me over $20 a month. And, good grief, the fur that gets out and everything. I haven't been able to use my home projector for movies for months because it's in the same area that he's in. But hey, I got a couch this year.